Hi, everybody. We are going to get started in a little bit. And welcome. This is the TSC webinar for human resources. And we're going to wait. People are still signing on. So we'll get going here shortly. Okay, it looks like we are going to get started. Welcome, everybody, to the TSC Explore OnBase series. We are today going to talk about OnBase for human resources. Human resources is a really critical part of every organization in terms of bringing in top talent and retaining top talent. So we're going to show you how OnBase is going to can be used in the human resource department, whether you are doing a talent acquisition or you're doing policy administration, or perhaps you have a ton of HR systems you need to tie together. So we have a lot to show you, and today we have Jack Roberts presenting, and Jack is been working with OnBase for over 25 years. And we also have Jack Pompey joining us from TSC. If you have questions, please put them in the question box, and we're going to try and make this session interactive. So if folks have questions along the way, or you want clarity on something we're showing or something we haven't seen yet, then go ahead and put the question in there. Jack will be fielding your questions and getting them over to Jack. So with that, why don't you take it away, Jack?
Okay, thanks everybody. Like Tom said, we'll make this as interactive as possible, so feel free to interrupt as needed. Okay, for the agenda today, we had introductions Tom just gave us. We're going to go through several different topics and try to get everybody done within 45 to 50 minutes. It could go faster, could go slower, depending on how many questions everybody has, but these are our topics. Recruiting, also known as talent acquisition now. There's several terms you'll see that have been around for quite a while, and they're getting rebranded with new terms. So we'll talk about some of those as we go through. Onboarding, offboarding is always a big process that we need to talk about, because that's really when you're going to set your first impression and then also your lasting impression on employees. Records management and risk mitigation. This is huge and oftentimes overlooked when it comes to human resources. So we're going to dive into that just a little bit. Policy procedure administration. Let's say you have a handbook, or let's say there's other policies that you have to push out company-wide. OnBase has that whole thing covered so that you can store all of those, have acknowledgments of those, and even be able to track if you want to test somebody on their knowledge, not just to say, yep, you read through it, click a box, but they could also test them on them, ask them 3 or 4 questions if you want, just to be able to make sure they know what they're talking about. Then you can put that certificate in OnBase as well, so you have a full round picture. We'll talk about digital employee file management. This is really important because as we go through and we have changed our world from being everybody in an office to everybody being scattered at home and working remotely, we need to be able to have everything digitized as we'll go through this. and then we'll hit on employee relationships and performance management. So we can talk about how to really control the narrative if you don't have a full-blown HR solution and you want to use OnBase for that. This is a great way to manage like grievances and incidents and anything that may happen. All right. So just to kind of show you 2 quick slides to let you understand that OnBase really is a huge platform, and we want to help you leverage what you've already made an investment in. So all the things I talked about today as far as the agenda, they're presented here, and you can see how that works. But it goes beyond just those specific topics. We have full-blown capabilities in OnBase that honestly most people don't take advantage of. And in today's world, we need to do more with less. And by doing that, we're investing in technology. Well, you all have hopefully already made the investment into OnBase. So now it's time to take advantage of that investment and be able to take and move forward with technology. We'll see a few things here, but the main thing to take away is we need to be mobile, we need to be agile, and we need to be able to act quickly. And that's kind of what we're talking about today with HR and onboarding. Back in the day, we talked about HR, and when we all were in an office, largely we would have filing cabinets filled with boxes and in trays of paper, and they could be scattered all over the place. And if you needed to actually find someone's file, it was the old sneaker net, right? You'd walk into a location, grab their file, then take it back to your desk. Well, if somebody else needed it, they couldn't find it. It was sitting on your desk. You're out for a couple of weeks. Then what happens? So there's all kinds of ways that we need to lock this stuff down, digitize it so it can be accessible by more than one person and not rely on humans to transfer and make sure everything's done. What we should be coming away with is our HR knowledge workers having a 360-degree view of this whole process, making sure that we can do cases automatically. So when a new employee starts, we should start the whole process off and start with onboarding. Make sure that we can see them onboarded, everything's filled out correctly. Then do we get everything assigned? Go to IT. Did they get a laptop assigned? Did they get a phone assigned? All that's kind of good things. This is something you should be able to see from an HR perspective, full 360-degree view, so we know everything happened. So we're going to talk about recruiting first. Recruiting, aka talent acquisition. You'll see there's quite a few bullet points here, but the big thing to know is we need to take advantage of the options that OnBase provides us. Full text is important when you're doing searching for resumes. Other things to consider is how long do you keep a resume if the person isn't suited for a current position they applied for, but they might be for another. All these things we need to keep track of, know it's there, be able to integrate with other websites, for instance, Indeed or ZipRecruiter, some of those are there. Well, the cool thing is with OnBase, it can monitor an inbox or even unattended watch like HR at, and you can see that it'll come through and pull the stuff in. Well, time is of the essence, so we have to get everything taken care of immediately. And by gathering all these things, you don't want to have to go out to a website and see the resumes. You don't want to have to then manually look through a bunch of different emails. Let's get those in the system. Let's use OnBase, the power of OnBase, to kind of look what they're applying for, or look to see what some of their skill sets are, and then we can route that around to appropriate people to say, does this person look good to you, to be able to have a phone interview with, and we can start that whole process. And a big key for everybody starting out is as soon as somebody applies, we need to make sure we're assigning an application ID to that person, because as we go forward, we need to have a unique way to tie back to that record. Well, a lot of times we'll go through the recruiting process and then go on to the onboarding process, but a person may not have an employee ID because we have to get them set up in the system first. We have to get their paperwork filled out, and then that has to be presented to whatever payroll system we may be using. And we can't do that and get an employee ID until it's in a payroll system. But we don't have a unique way to track them from beginning to end. So that's why we like to use an application ID and let that work as our unique identifier for this person going forward, not only by their name, but by this identifier. And then that can roll into maybe even being the employee ID, or if we need to assign another employee ID, now the applicant ID and the employee ID are 2 unique ways to get back to a person's file. As we move forward, this is an example of what you could have, what's called a Unity form. It's an electronic form within OnBase. Hopefully you all are familiar with those. You can create these, they're user point and click configurable, which is great. But the cool thing to talk about here is this can be on your website. This form can just literally live on your website. Even though we created OnBase, we can publish it to your website so that when somebody comes out and they want to apply for a position, they come in, they'll fill out their information. So basically, they're filling out this application that you see right here, and they're also doing because we know what they're filling out, that's application, that's the document type that we have in OnBase. Then with these different fields, when they fill those out, that's now they're filling out the keywords for you. So you don't have to go and do all this manual data entry. On top of that, we can upload a resume or a cover letter, have them attach it. It goes right attached to this Unity form. So they're separate documents in OnBase, but the cool thing is I can pull up the Unity form and get access to those two documents immediately. You can say if one's required or one's not. As you can see on the screen here, the resume is required. They must upload that. And so you can have that and be attached. Some people have multiple resumes because they're applying for multiple positions. It's not common, but you can have that. And so in the scenario we're looking at right now, we could attach multiple resumes if we wanted to. Again, this is an example of a form that could live on your website and it can post right back into OnBase, eliminating the need for document classification as well as document indexing. Now let's jump into onboarding and offboarding. The big thing is we got to act fast and we got to make sure that we get an actual recruit that we think is going to be great, get them all the necessary information they need to be able to really get signed up with us, get us working with them, get their list of tasks assigned to them so they're engaged. We want them to fully be engaged and not give a chance to say, oh, I got another offer, maybe I'll go over here and do this and look at that. We need to make sure we act fast, get them in, get them through the onboarding process, and let them get going. By doing that, we need to really think about not only can we have stuff that's on the website, but we need to be able to give people options for mobile devices as well. A lot of times now people are looking more to their phone, to their tablets, and they're wanting to fill things out and do it that way and not actually have to go to an actual PC and do this stuff. The newer generation is all tech savvy, so they're going to want this stuff and be able to have everything mobile. Their cell phone is their life. And so we got to be able to make sure whatever we present to them can be done on the mobile phone. The interesting statistics here is 59% of all new employees are gone within the first year. And that was from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's a lot. That's over half the people you hire are be gone. So it's important to get people established, get them in, and make sure that you're presenting your best foot forward to show, yes, we are modern, we're fresh, we're ready to go. We want to help you succeed. Again, we're talking about the millennials here and how they've surpassed Gen X, and there's 54.2 million employed now, according to Pew Research. And the millennials are really wanting to jump in and take advantage of technology, and they're expecting our companies to be embraced with technology and make sure that we're putting a great first impression out there for them. So we start talking about this onboarding process, and where OnBase comes into play is not only do we have their information from the recruiting standpoint, now we can transition that into an actual file for this employee. We can have their application information in that file, as well as any employment documentation in that file, as well as any potential certificates they've passed during training. But you really want to have everything together. And as people are going through to sign this, maybe an offer letter, for instance, they want them to sign it. This is important because now we have the ability to integrate with Adobe Sign and DocuSign both within OnBase. So we don't want an employee have to go and download software and do anything specific before they're even hired. So now we have the option to use these electronic signature pieces that are already made for mobile. They can sign there, and then the whole process begins with, now I've got a checklist. Checklists are huge and important to make sure that we're being consistent, doing the same thing for every person as they come on board. Different departments may have different criteria. So we follow that checklist. Not only can we see where we're at in a process and what we have done and what's left to do, but also make sure that we're being consistent with everybody. Once we actually get someone hired and they're on our system, OnBase has the ability to send out email notifications saying, hey, thank you so much and welcome to our company. And then the email would go forward and give you a link. You can click on that link, and that person now has access to all the electronic documents they can fill out. like a W-4, for instance, and any other documents we want them to fill out electronically, this link will provide that right to them. Most organizations are now going to a concept of a employee portal, especially a new hire portal. An example of that would be like this screen. This is a status view. If you're familiar with OnBase web client, well, there's a whole portion there that people don't typically use, and this is the status view portion where you can create these little windows in there. They're called widgets, and within those widgets, we can actually go through and set this up, put in instructions, have forms for them to fill out. We can actually show them stuff they've already filled out. Bottom left corner, you see there's policies to acknowledge. They have to do all this stuff before they can really get going on their job, and we can really tailor this screen to however we need to do this. But this is a great way for a landing spot for people. Again, that status view with the web client, it was existence before the Unity client was available to us. So in the Unity client, we have our personal pages. We can go through and have our little tiles and put everything there. This is a nice fresh look at how you can do this for an employee and give them an onboard, and they can see where they're at with everything. And likewise, you from the HR side can also see what's happening with this. So I just want to show there's the new forms we have set up, so you can see those as we're going through, and they know exactly where to click. A little above that, we can see the instructions to what they're going to fill out, and then below we can see all the policies to acknowledge, kind of like I pointed out before. The key is, again, checklists to make sure we have those taken care of, having dynamic workflows built in so that we can adjust on the fly. So if somebody comes in and they're going to be a janitor, they're going to have a different set of criteria that they need to meet and sign on the paperwork as compared to somebody who's going to be an executive assistant, for instance. So just optimal ways to set this up, but truly having a dashboard view and seeing the whole process where they're at, that's important. So if we look at this, OnBase can even generate these letters for you and go through and have these checklists. This screen is a great example of how I can use OnBase and even WorkView to build an actual case for this person. So as this person comes on, it's a unique case. I'm going to add them in, add all their information in. Here's my checklist. As you can see, we got the Active Directory. Do we need to make sure that IT's got that? Facilities has to give them building access. Do they need a corporate credit card? So on and so forth. All those items, those checklists can be assigned to specific people. And from this particular screen that we're showing as an example, I now know what's been done, what hasn't been done, and I can follow the process. I can even set up timers so it comes back and tells us, oh, this wasn't done in the time we specified. Send an email to a group, maybe to group and CC their manager, so you can have different ways of notification with this. As much as we can make things visible and in our face without being intrusive, that's the way we want to do it. So like I said, if we have these items we're supposed to do, we can send out emails from workflow that says, okay, these are your tasks you need to do. And it's going to say, in this scenario, it's a great email to list out, here's the system type that you need to do with who's assigned to, the system action, and then finally a link right to the specific task that they need to do. So this is perfect for going in, onboarding somebody. As you're seeing this from an HR perspective, you can watch from that previous screen that I was showing you how each one of these things done, it gets a little check mark by it and goes on, it's done, it's done, it's done, and I can see it real time. The other cool thing about this is it also gives us some metrics to say, how long is it taking us to respond to these things? What is our average time from the time we say, okay, here's your offer letter, they accept it, till we get them onboarded? Because again, time is a big factor here that we have to keep in mind, that we got to get their interest. People are willing to sit and wait and take the best option. But if we're right there, we're off in the letter, they accept it, we're hoping to get them in, start that process before they can say, oh, you know what, I got another offer. Hopefully you get them in the door, impress them with the first impression, and make sure they have everything they've got. People are more inclined to, okay, I've got the commitment from the actual employer, I feel like I need to go forward with this, and hopefully not try to hop and jump and pit each other against each other. That's how we can watch from where we're at right now and find out what's going on. I mentioned a dashboard. This is a reporting capabilities inside of OnBase. It's great to say, where am I at with all this stuff? I have my different positions that are out there. I can see what they're supposed to start with, department they're supposed to be in, a specific position, all these things. I can see it's in progress, it's complete, but I know right from the get-go, from this one screen, I can see where my new hires were by month if I want to, what departments were specific, And then I can have a grid view that says, here's everybody that's applied, been accepted, and where they're at. Likewise, people don't think about the flip side of this, but for offboarding, you could even have a similar screen that says, okay, people may want to know, maybe you're in a bigger organization and people want to know when people have left. So you can have a potential outboard going out so that people could watch that and say, oh, look, I'm looking up for somebody like Andre Young. Andre Young left the company last month. And I can see that if they're not replying to my emails. So it's very important to know that you can do onboarding and offboarding, especially from a dashboard view, very easily. So what that gives us is, again, that full 360-degree view of the entire process. It really helps the employee to be engaged, and it gives us the ability to have these checklists. You're going to hear checklists over and over again. If you think about it, a pilot, when they go to fly, they always have to go through the same checklist. They may have flown thousands of times, but they have to go through this checklist every time because it's important. If they miss any specific thing, they've got all these people's lives on board that they have to be responsible for. Well, it's the same kind of situation here. Maybe we're not talking about people's lives being lost, but we're talking about having a checklist, and you've done it so many times, you can go through it, you think, oh, I already done that, but I haven't for this specific person. And you got to have that checklist to ensure, yes, I'm getting it done. All right, moving right along to records management and risk mitigation. We find that we need to really have and embrace records management within HR, because there's usually some kind of statute that says you have to keep records, employee records, for X amount of time. That varies by state. So you can go in and say, oh, I need to have it for 7 years. And that 7 years could be dependent on the actual separation date. It could be also dependent on other factors. So we need to keep in track of all that, put that around there. But remember, everything is set up for e-discovery. So if there's any kind of litigation that happens between a former employee and the company, we need to make sure we have that. Well, if we're setting this up to have all these records in records management, let's say it's set up for 2 years, I'm just making something simple, and the litigation's happening, I don't want those records to be deleted. Well, you have the ability inside of OnBase using records management to be able to place things on hold, litigation hold. What's the reason? Because we have litigation pending. We could have other reasons why we need to be able to do that. Maybe the person is going to come back and be rehired. So we don't want this to be actual disposed of. We want to actually hold on to these records for a little bit longer to make sure, yeah, they went through the hire process, great. I don't want to assign them a new employee ID. I don't want to have to go through and build a new file for them. I want to make sure that I have everything right here and just continue on. Again, these are all options that you have. Does the wording mean the same thing to you? Do you need to change that? That's all configurable. The concept is we need to make sure we're capturing these records, storing them appropriately, and then being able to get rid of them if necessary because of e-discovery. A fun fact is in California now, the HR world is being implored to make sure everything is digitized. So they have a hard, fast regulation coming down that they have to take all their paper files and they have to get them all digital. When Obama was in the office, he pushed through and said all healthcare records need to be digital so we can transfer those electronically. The same thing's happening with HR records. They're going to start forcing this to have all of that digitized. So we really need to make sure we're on board with that and getting ahead of that game. We need to look at exception reports because it's kind of interesting to see that I may know I have these documents filled out, but I don't know if the employee filled all of them out. This is a nice little way, and people don't even realize how simple this is to set up, is if I'm expecting to have X amount of documents by employee, I can run this report and see for everybody across the board what documents they'd be missing. And then obviously I could use workflow to prompt them to enter those documents, but from an HR perspective, I can run a report and easily see that I'm missing something. Like if you're missing an I-9, like it's showing on the screen right now, that's a very bad thing. They need to have that filled out and completed before they ever start working. So these are things that you can look at and even be prompted so that if a person's date of hire is coming up and they're supposed to start on, let's say on Monday, well, you need to be notified that Wednesday before, have they filled out the I-9? If it hasn't been completed yet, you better start getting a notification and better start sitting it out and making sure that that applicant is actually filling out that I-9 before they start on that Monday. Policy procedures. Some people don't contribute this to HR, but they really should, in the fact of we need to be able to find our documents and push policies out. In the older world, we would not have a true centralized location, kind of is left up to the managers to push out these policies. And did they get the information back from the employees? Yes or no? Do they need to have any kind of signature on it? Maybe there's OSHA videos they need to watch. How do you know that they're really doing that without actually being hovering over them? Most of the time, we don't have the time built in to micromanage people to make sure they're doing all this stuff. We want to take advantage of the system and say, okay, we really want the system to handle this for us. Create these workflows that'll go out and effectively manage, push out notifications saying we need to have this happen. Be able to go through and let the HR people know or the hiring manager know we still don't have this. We need to make sure we have the handbook signed, for instance. Maybe we have a no smoking policy. We need to have that acknowledged. Maybe there's a whole safety video they have to watch before they can actually go onto the plant floor, for instance. All these things are very important to look and make sure we can talk about and show that we have that. If we ever go through any kind of audits, we need to make sure that we can show the auditors we have these records. We have everything there for the person, especially when it comes down to making sure that there's any kind of like OSHA reports or OSHA videos they need to watch, policy procedures that must be taken care of before a person can do anything. Because if we go through not only this stuff, but we talk about security training as we go through in IT, they're saying, okay, you're gonna have to have longer passwords. You're gonna have to change this. You're gonna have to make sure you know what malware is and what's phishing, for instance. Those things are all part of policy and procedures that we need to be able to validate and have a reference that yes, each employee saw that and acknowledged it. If they reject it for any reason, we need to know what the rejection was. If they don't agree with that, okay, maybe the supporting document that says they didn't agree with it to begin with because they didn't know the whole reference behind it. Well, with OnBase and document knowledge transfer, you can actually have a document set forth so they can use it and then be able to have reference documents that maybe are supporting documents that, okay, when you're looking at this and you acknowledge this, you need to read a second document that gives us context to the original what we're asking you to acknowledge. So again, nice little center picture where OnBase is in the middle, and it should be there to help you create your workflows, distribute the work out, make sure we have notifications built in, we can track and improve and make sure that we have everything set up, and then easily be able to search or retrieve any records we have on any employee. So this is an example of an actual screen that we have set up so we can see presenting a document to an actual individual. We're saying, okay, you come in, you look at this, we need to be able to have you acknowledge it. There's a little button at the top, acknowledge, reject, or reference. And then after they acknowledge it, we can even enable those options to be able to take a test, take a quick little test, ask them some questions. These questions could be yes, no questions, could be essay questions. You can do all kinds of different things, but they're there as an option. So you should really be taking advantage of that. So again, there's where I'm pointing it out to show you, hey, there's a whole knowledge transfer tab that comes up when you go to look for these documents. On top of that, the document knowledge transfer gives you the ability to say, oh, who's actually been approved of this and who's actually accepted it, and then who is delinquent, meaning they haven't went in and even looked at this and they acknowledged it or rejected it or whatever. So we can see this, we can capture the date and time that they actually stored this document that went out for them, as well as if a person acknowledged it, we'll get that date captured. And if they're delinquent, like, okay, we got an issue here. If you have, let's say you pushed out a policy that you wanted somebody to acknowledge, and you have 500 people in your organization, you're not going to go through a list like this and look at each individual person and say, okay, I need to email this person, email that person. You want the system to do that for you. You want to be as efficient as possible. So you can see right here, we have a list. As we go even into the web client, it can generate an export report to see who's approved, who is not approved. But the cool thing is we can actually send out notifications. So we come in here, we say, okay, I need to notify these people, you're delinquent, you have X amount of days to do this. And you can put in whatever wording you want. Just make sure that you're going out and telling people, you have to sign this, this is gonna have to happen before you can advance to the next opportunity in your career. So wrapping that up, we really need to make sure we have version control, because as we go through from year to year, we may need to make sure that they acknowledge the handbook if we make any changes. So that the handbook went from version 1 to version 2. I don't want them seeing version 1 anymore. I can control all of that in OnBase, so I have these different versions and make sure that latest one is presented. We can have full-blown access to know who's acknowledged it. We can track things and send out emails to anybody that might be delinquent. If we talk about a little bit, so why does all this matter? The big thing is we need to make sure we're treating all employees the same. We can't show favoritism. We can't go through and do different things. But in reality is we don't have enough hours in the day to be able to track this stuff down, especially working remote. We can't go to somebody's desk and say, hey, I need you to sign this. I need you to acknowledge this. You're going to have to make sure that you're using the system and make sure that the acknowledgement is sent out globally so you can have everybody do that, and let OnBase do the work for you. You go take care of things that's going to take your time, that's going to make sure that you have the decision making to make that happen. Let OnBase do all this low hanging fruit in the background for you to help you go on and do your job and make actual decisions on things that need your true expertise versus administrative tasks. Moving right along, digital employee file management. Again, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but knowing that we have people scattered throughout the entire world potentially, we need to have quick and easy access to be able to get people to have access to their HR files. Maybe it's specific to a policy change we had. Maybe it's specific to taking a test and we need to get that certification stored. All of that we need to make sure is here and in place. The other thing this allows us to do is stay in compliance. So if we are needing to make sure people have certain things signed off on, if we need to make sure we have all the supporting documentation in a person's file, OnBase can do that for you. All you have to do is set it up to configure that, and then it can monitor that for you and help you stay in compliance. We're starting to talk about integrations. There's so many different ways that we need to integrate and make sure that OnBase can talk to these other systems. Well, the first one we're going to talk about is Outlook integration. Most people don't realize that there's a whole plugin for OnBase that goes right into your Outlook. And you see on the screen, I can pull up a retrieval right from Outlook. So Outlook is really acting as another OnBase client. I can even go to pull up my client if I want to see that. I can import a file from disk. I can also import an email, and I can import the email and or its attachment. So these are all things that are purposely there set up for us. And taking a little bit further with the Outlook integration, you can even set up a folder on in your inbox so that if you take an email and you drag and drop it onto that folder can be set up to say, oh, anything that gets dropped off this folder is assigned to this document type in OnBase. It'll grab certain keywords from the email itself and then goes right into OnBase and enters a workflow potentially that could be routed around to whomever needs to see this and work with it. We start talking about a little bit more of the HRS systems, and we talk about PeopleSoft, ADP, Lawson. All those things are great, and they all have their own purpose, but you need one record of truth. So if an employee starts, before they ever start and they're applying for everything, we need to capture that information. A lot of times these HRS systems don't necessarily do that. It's the record of truth with respect to when they're hired, when they may have a separation, all that kind of stuff, but OnBase should be storing all those documents, and you should have integration. Maybe that integration is as simple as using application enabler to look at a PeopleSoft screen, double click on it, and pull up my related documents for that person. Or it could be with a PeopleSoft integration and OnBase where it's bidirectional, so that I don't have to worry about what's in PeopleSoft and OnBase being different. If something gets updated in PeopleSoft, it can pass that information over to OnBase. If something's updated on OnBase, it can pass that over to PeopleSoft. So you really want to make sure you have communication back and forth. Integration is kind of a loose term that people put out there, and it can mean anything and everything. We see foldering in OnBase. It's been around forever. We're still surprised about how many OnBase systems we touch that does not have foldering set up. It's such a great and simple way to see your documents and not necessarily go through just a retrieval and have your documents pull up in a big old list and you can sort through those and all that good stuff. But in a HR world, having a person as an actual folder at the very top, and then I can see all their information below, like the application information that's contained in a subfolder underneath that person's file. Then I could have any correspondence, maybe I have any employee documentation that I need to store in there. These are all ways to subcategorize everything, still in OnBase, but just breaking it out so I can see it effectively and easily. But the cool thing also is we can actually see what's there, what our folders are, but then more importantly, I can see what's missing. I can have the folder show, here's my documents that are there, here's what is not found. You can make those be in different colors so they stand out easily to you and see that. That's great from a one-off position where you can look at this and see what's missing. But again, go back to those exception reports. You can run those and actually see what's happening and know that from an actual employee-wide or company-wide standpoint. And again, those tabs are very important to subcategorize everything. These are just examples of how we have set it up in the past. You can set it up however you want, whatever makes most sense to your organization. So what happens next? We should be able to report on everything. We need to be able to have mobile access, mobile ready. You're going to hear that time and time again. Everybody now has a cell phone. Most people don't even have a home phone anymore unless they need to have some kind of garage or gate code to get into the community and stuff like that. But you need to make sure that you're giving mobile access to people. Well, some people go and say, I want to write custom code. I'll do this specific thing. We're under the impression of if I can do it point and click and OnBase and it already is mobile friendly, why would I go create something that I have to maintain that code? So again, we encourage you to go out and look at the different features in OnBase that we can create these Unity forms, give people mobile access, and really take it a step further. If you want to use the OnBase mobile client on your cell phone or tablet, you can. And you can see pretty much most of what I've talked about here. You can accept workflows and approve workflows, deny, do whatever you need to do within a workflow. You can actually bring up a form and do different things. What some people don't realize is the OnBase mobile client also gives you the ability to take a picture or even upload a picture. So as we're going out in the field, let's say I need to get a picture of a person's driver's license and or their passport. Well, most people don't have a scanner laying around to do that. They're going to use their mobile phone. Well, this is a great chance to take that mobile phone, the mobile capabilities of OnBase Mobile even, allow them to take those pictures and it can go right into OnBase for you. So there's something to keep in mind that mobile is huge and it's going to be a big push going forward. So we see the old days, we used to be so buried in paper and it just was a mountain of paper to deal with. We want to talk about doing that and eliminating paper storage. There's soft cost to all this stuff. We talk about not having to store the paper, not having to go back and retrieve the paper. Maybe you're sending that paper off to be stored in a cave somewhere or in a huge box storage location. All that is still doable. But as we start moving into digital file management, we're going to need everything to be electronic and be able to get to it and access it very quickly. Final topic, employee relations. It's important to know that we need to capture all this information up until the point of now they're onboarded. Maybe even have them working there for several years, but we need to know what's happening with this. So what is our employee relations? It's really, from an HR perspective, we're capturing different things like incident management. Let's say that we went in and somebody actually slipped on the floor and fell. Well, we can open a case and say, Johnny fell on the floor was wet, somebody didn't mop it up, and so on and so forth. We can see what all has to happen. We can monitor that case from the beginning to the end. And I can tell you right now, if you ever go through any litigation, having this kind of documentation is huge. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. So just keep that in mind. But you can do all kinds of things. We can have incidents, we can have grievances. Maybe we're doing investigations or disciplinary actions. All these things are important that we can have in an employee's file and manage it right away and know from a HR perspective, maybe from their manager perspective, what's happening with this. You can do performance improvement plans if you need to. Also set it up so that you have reviews coming up. Well, I need to know 60 days out before the review's there. Maybe I want to send out an actual email to the employee asking them to fill out a self-evaluation. And then 2 weeks after I get that back, I can send an email to the hiring manager saying, okay, you need to actually go through and fill out the evaluation, and here's the self-evaluation from the employee themselves. All that can be managed in one big case, and then you can continue on with it. So again, we talked about litigation a lot. This is a driver for us that we got to make sure we're covering our company and covering ourselves. So like we mentioned before, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. Going to show you a few examples of screens that are set up that you can say, I really want to have information for my employees captured so I can get to it. And the cool thing is, if you start doing this inside of OnBase, inside of even WorkView in OnBase, you don't have to worry about integrating with another system to be able to pull in data. OnBase can talk to these WorkView objects natively and not have to go out and do different things. That speeds up the time of actual configuration. It also helps the user experience to be able to say, I can access stuff and not have to wait for OnBase to go out and talk to this other system. That system has to respond. Now it has to display it to me. Instead, it's already there in OnBase and snaps and it's there for you. Another example of how you can monitor an employee and go through and see this screen, which is really kind of nice because you can make it as colorful as you want. You can add in icons to different things. You can have predefined lists in here. So if you go through and you file a grievance, the resolutions, I could have those be a drop-down list of how it was resolved. I can even go through and say there were other employees involved, add those to the situation, or add those to the case and go forward with that. We can take notes and have access to all this. And I'll call your attention as we go through this stuff to see what are our options. Oops, sorry, I didn't even do that. At the top, we can see we need to escalate this. Maybe we need to start a performance and improvement process. Those are all predefined tasks that we can set up and have that information, whether it's send out a notification, maybe automatically assign or request additional documentation. Could be that it creates a new form for you, a Unity form, for instance, fills out the information. You say, yep, that's what I want. You add any notes to it, you hit submit, and now that takes off into a workflow and has a different mind of its own. One thing that people aren't using enough is a module called document composition. Right from WorkView or workflow in OnBase, you can have a document. Let's say you have a Word document. It's all just a nice little Word template. We can use OnBase to call that Word template and automatically fill in certain sections of the document based off of keywords. And then I have my nice form letter already filled out. I can then hit send, it sends it out, and it's automatically stored back into OnBase. So I have that, a copy of that, and it can go on a workflow. That's an interactive task. You could also have this happen in the background. So as you go through and you say, okay, I want to start this process, one of the things OnBase can do for you is in the background, merge that Word document together with the necessary keywords. So I have a nice document to send out to the employee, and away we go. So there's something that you should really think about if you don't use it that today and you have a license. Document composition is important. So as I was kind of pointing out before, these actions that you're seeing at the top of the screen, these are all examples, but we show these to you so that you can start the whole thought process kicking off. If you need to collect documents from an employee, if you need to put a case on a hold, maybe you need to send it out and you need to share documents with people, you can do all of this right here. Even convert these documents that you have into a PDF so that you say, okay, I need to have this into a PDF and now I have to give a copy to the employee. Well, you don't want them to have a Word document, you want them to actually have a PDF version. Perfect, send it out. So just examples and to get the creative juices flowing on what you could do when you start managing your employees digitally and all their relations. We talked about working with documents and how they can be set up. Here we're giving an example of the document composition I was referring to earlier, where you can say, okay, here's my template group. Here's my template I want it to have, performance and improvement. I can go through and preview the document I want to edit it. Maybe I want to email it out right away from here. This is just one example to see. As I go through, you can say, okay, fill in any of the blanks that I don't have. In this case, it's prompting me because I need to know which do you prefer in this task. And it's providing me a little box to enter the days. I can enter 30 days, for instance. I hit OK, and away it goes. It's going to generate a document that looks like this. And you'll see in red that there's that 30 that I filled in. It went out and grabbed the employee name, filled it in where it's supposed to, grabbed their position, filled that in, manager's name, grab that, data discussion, everything there is being filled in by OnBase. So I have this document, and I'll call your attention to the top. We see the accept, redo, all that kind of stuff, print. Hopefully we don't print, but if you need to, you can. There's the whole accept button. So once I do that, it sends this document off to the employee. We have it all set up and ready to go. So again, document composition, very important. We keep talking about reporting. If you haven't looked into reporting, the reporting dashboards is very, very easy to use and very important, because now I can see everything in the system, and maybe I don't need to know how to go into OnBase and do all this stuff. Reporting dashboards can even be a link right off your website, so that if you said, okay, I have OnBase website set up, I want to send out an email notification to people, I need them to be able to look at certain things. You may not have them look at this dashboard, but if they're not used to going into OnBase, you send an email, they click on that link, it can show this particular screen, for instance, that's saying all kinds of cool stuff. I can filter it down by case type. If I need to, I can go in and look and see a snapshot view in time of what happened. That middle bar that has a little chart looking thing to it, that got some triangles and stuff going on, that's an actual filter, a time filter. You can adjust that filter to whatever date range you want, and it's going to dynamically update the rest of these reports so you can see that. Again, just examples that's out there. If you want to see it, nice, quick and way to see a 360 view versus one-on-one. So we get into benefits, and we start going through different things to see how much is there. We need to know about all of our information. How can we improve our issue resolutions? We get the metrics around what's happening for the employees, and really we can reflect on that. We can look to say, you know what, we're seeing trends. We're reporting on these trends, but we need to take action against those. Maybe we're doing something wrong as a company, and we can see that by this reporting. So just a nice way to safeguard against legal risks, and the reports are very, very important. Anything you saw today hopefully sparked your interest. Please reach out and we can talk to you specific about a demonstration that may be more focused on your company and your company's needs, maybe with certain modules that are there. We're happy to talk to you and see what's there, and make sure that you understand what your options are with what you already own, and maybe not have to buy anything new.
If anyone has any questions, we would love to take them now in the chat. If not, you'll also receive a follow-up survey, and we'd appreciate hearing back from you on what you'd like to see in future webinars, and if you have any specific questions and follow-up to today. If you're not currently using OnBase and you want to take a look at a more entry-level version of OnBase for maybe your accounts payable or your contract management or other areas of your operation, we'd be happy to have that conversation with you as well. Jack, thank you for presenting. That was wonderful. And everybody who is registered for today will receive a recording of today's event. So keep an eye out for that in the next day or so. With that, we are going to call it a day. Thanks so much for spending your time with us today. We appreciate it.